We begin tonight with what the president did today. What the president did today is news, but it is not new. It is not new to see the president lying, provably lying as he did today. The president lied today knowing that everywhere except the Fox propaganda channel, we would be showing you the video that proves the president was lying to America today. And that isn't new. He's done that before. What is new is the president finding fault with his own supporters, saying he wasn't happy with them, doesn't agree with what they did at his rally last night when his 15-minute lying rant about 4 members of Congress took his audience right up to the edge where they started chanting, "Send her back," about one of those members of Congress.
Mr. President, if I may, when your supporters last night were chanting, "Send her back," why didn't you stop them? Why didn't you ask them to stop saying that?
Well, number one, I think I did. I started speaking very quickly. It really was a loud, I disagree with it, by the way, but it was quite a chant, and I felt a little bit badly about it. But I will say this, I did, and I started speaking very quickly, but it started up rather fast, as you probably noticed.
So you'll tell your supporters never to
Well,
say that?
I would say that. I was not happy with it. I disagree with it. But again, I didn't say that. They did, but I disagree with it.
But they were echoing what you said in your first tweet, that they should go back.
Well, I don't think if you examine it, I don't think you'll find that, but I disagree with it.
Now, Donald Trump knows that we are going to examine it, and he knows exactly what we're going to find. Why didn't you ask them to stop saying that? Well, number one, I think I did. No, he didn't. And he knows that we're going to find that he just lied, that he did not start speaking very quickly, that he did not try to stop anything. He did the opposite. He gave the chant the space it needed to fill the room. Here's the president last night lying about Congresswoman Ilhan Omar as he pushes the audience to the logical point of their chant.
And obviously and importantly, Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds. And she talked about...
There it is, the proof of the lie. And a few minutes later, last night, the president said this.
Tonight I have a suggestion for the hate-filled extremists who are constantly trying to tear our country down. They never have anything good to say. That's why I say, hey, if they don't like it, let them leave. Let them leave. Let them leave. They're always telling us how to run it, how to do this, how to do... You know what? If they don't love it, tell them to leave it.
Last night, the Trump audience was just following the president's lead, saying what they were sure he wanted to hear. They were simply echoing what they already heard from him. But today, maybe enough Republicans must have privately found a way to get the president to pretend that he disagreed with what his crowd said last night. There has been much comparison today to the John McCain moment in the 2008 presidential campaign and how much better presidential candidate John McCain handled that moment than Donald Trump ever could or would.
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No?
No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues.
Boy, you just can't watch that enough these days. John McCain says, "No, ma'am," and he reaches in and he takes that microphone away. And John McCain has gotten a lot of well-deserved credit for that moment over the years, but here's the most important thing about it. At that time in American politics, Any other response by a presidential nominee was unthinkable, absolutely unthinkable. What John McCain said then was what most members of the United States Senate would have said in those same circumstances at that time. John McCain's decency level was not higher than average for United States senators during his time in the United States Senate. But now that Mitch McConnell has driven decency out of the Republican side of the United States Senate, it's hard to remember the way things were before the Trump-McConnell alliance. But we still have examples of politicians who know exactly what to do when they don't like what their supporters in a crowd are doing or chanting or saying. They don't make the excuse that the audience misbehavior just started too fast for them to handle, and they don't lie after the fact about what happened. Here is an example of that. Here is one of the congresswomen who President Trump has been attacking for days now and attacked last night. Here's one of those congresswomen stopping her own supporters in an audience when she didn't like their reaction to someone who was disagreeing with her in a town hall about climate change hosted by Chris Hayes.
Can we come back maybe to universal basic income a little bit later?
Hey, that's unacceptable, and that's the difference between me and Trump.
That's good. I appreciate that.
Decency still lives. Decency lives in the 4 congresswomen who Donald Trump attacked for his audience last night, and the congresswoman who Donald Trump's supporters want to send back. Actually went back to her congressional district today, and here was the scene when Congresswoman Ilhan Omar arrived at the airport in Minneapolis. Leading off our discussion tonight are Neera Tanden, the president of the Center for American Progress, and Renee Graham, an associate editor and opinion columnist for the Boston Globe. And Neera, I want to get your reaction today. I am mystified by 2 things. I do not understand why the president decided he had to disagree with his rally audience today. I don't understand why he was more orange today than he has been in a long time, but that's a separate point that I will just leave to the mysteries of the Trump world. But I really don't get what happened here that made him step back and say, I disagree with that rally audience.
Yeah, I think we should take note of this turn of events, because I think for the last several days, we've heard a lot of pundits, a lot of Trump watchers say, you know, he has a secret plan, that this is a perfect strategy. It's going to help him win his reelection. And like so many things that the president does, it got out of control. You know, what happened last night, I think he recognized only because Republicans who are up for election recognized that the imagery of this crowd of thousands of mostly white people screaming, "Send her back," to about a woman from Africa who was a refugee who is a citizen of the United States and a congresswoman, was too much for them to bear. And I don't think they had a moral conscience. I think they had a political reckoning, which is the polls show that 60% of Americans think this is racist. Independents think the president is, majority think his behavior is racist. And he was looking at a political problem and actually did an about-face. So the idea that he has master strategy should also go out the window this evening.
Renee Graham, your reaction to what we saw the president do today and this story as it's unfolded?
Well, I think what I found interesting about it is when he made the comment, you know, I tried to stop it. unless he was trying to do it telepathically with his supporters, I certainly didn't see it. He also doesn't express disapproval with what's going on. He sort of stands there passively for about 15 minutes while this chant is continuing. And it made me wonder, was this even spontaneous? You know, the chant has that same rat-a-tat rhythm as lock her up. So are we to believe that his supporters just spontaneously came with his chant and he knew nothing about it? He doesn't seem at all surprised when it occurs. The fact that he then sat today and said, well, I disagree with it, you know, I think he's trying to have it both ways. He's trying to make it seem like somehow he was the innocent in all of this and that this was just something that happened with his supporters, while not even bothering to acknowledge how much his own rhetoric was ramping them up.
You know, Renee, I wondered that same thing. It's a perfectly composed chant. It seems to come out of the Trump chant book, the Trump hymnal, as it were, so perfectly balanced to lock her up. I've listened to this audio repeatedly, and it doesn't answer the question, I have to say. You come away from it saying, I don't know, this could have been organized somehow, and it backfired on the Trump campaign, and they decided to pull away from it based on the polling. And Neera, as you say, we showed that polling last night. It was devastatingly bad for the president, but they were much more confident about where they stood on this last night, because what the president was doing there was rare for him. It was a teleprompter speech for the most part at a Trump rally. Most of what we heard him say was actually written by the Trump team before he walked into that audience.
And let's be honest, the audience is basically saying what Trump has been saying.
Yes.
I mean, this is what's so weird about this whole thing. He's like, I disagree with what they said, but I'm the one who said it day after day after day. So does he substantively disagree with himself? I mean, obviously, this whole thing is ridiculous and absurd. The crowd is simply giving back to Trump what they think he is saying himself and has been saying, which is essentially that Ilhan Omar is not a citizen of the United States. But I think what the Trump campaign is trying to do is to otherize people. But I think maybe just the potential of hope here is that the American people recognize that calling everyone an immigrant, everyone who's a legal immigrant, essentially not American, is itself un-American. And they've lost this policy and political debate, and they have to retreat. We'll see. We'll see if he tweets the same stuff this weekend. But at least for the day, it seems like he's recognized he's gone too far.
The Charlotte Observer editorial board is, of course, saddened by this event and doubly saddened that it happened in their state of North Carolina. They wrote, "Send her back," Donald Trump's supporters chanted, without seeing the irony that it was they who were moving backward. "Send her back," they cried. And it was both a reminder and a warning that here in North Carolina, in America, going back is not that far a journey. And Renee, I thought that was a very powerful point that they were making. One of the things we've been hearing people say a lot, and I understand politicians saying it because they take a more optimistic view of things generally than a lot of the rest of us, that we are better than this, the "we are better than this" chant. And it turns out, no, we're not. A minimum of 40% of us are not better than this. And that's on display in that kind of rally.
Well, you know, I think that's often the problem when we have some sort of an incident like this, and the first thing is like, this isn't who we are, we're better than this. No, this is exactly who America is. This is exactly who we are. And we are this because we've not dealt with these issues for centuries. You know, it's always easy to sort of look at Donald Trump and say, oh, God, this started in November of 2016. It didn't. It started centuries before, and because it's gone unattended for so long, we now have a president who can stand in an arena in front of thousands of people and encourage his supporters to say, send her back, about a sitting congresswoman who is an American citizen. So there's always this feeling of, wow, we need to be better than this. Well, let's actually do that. You know, Donald Trump doesn't become president if we had actually been better than this. And
Neera, you know, as the news of the day developed, I knew two things for sure were going to be in these first minutes of tonight's program. One, the John McCain video. And the other, The Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez video that I remember watching during Chris Hayes' town hall, which was held in her congressional district, those were her people filling up that hall on climate change. And when one of the people she was debating disagreed with her in a way the audience didn't like, they started to chant. You saw it. They started to yell at him. And you saw what she did. And that point that she made, that's the difference between her and Trump, is so true. And it is the tip of the iceberg of the difference between her and Trump.
It's there, absolutely, but the real difference is leadership, and leadership is telling your supporters, not just the people you disagree with, but your supporters, that you have to actually hear from the other side, and we haven't heard that in years from Donald Trump.
Neera Tanden and Renee Graham, thank you very much for starting us off tonight. Really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.